Evening all, welcome to Archant Towers. David Freezer here, alongside our Chief Norwich City correspondent Paddy Davitt, and we have a lengthy injury bulletin to bring you this afternoon. Quite a chat with Daniel Farke, wasn't it, at lunchtime at Colney? He, I think he's just about going to put together an 18 for the trip to Barnsley tomorrow, isn't he?
Yeah, I mean, I did flippantly ask, had he enough players to actually put a team on the pitch? He says he has, so we'll wait to see the team sheet. But you've written them down there, Dave, and I mean, I can't. There's been some gloomy injury bulletins down at Colney this season, but I think this one is the gold medal because it was just one thing after another.
I mean, overall, I thought it was quite a calming experience, to be honest. After Saturday being so chaotic and a 4-3 defeat, I thought Daniel, in his sort of demeanour, was quite calming, sort of reassuring people that he's not going to throw the baby out with the bath water and make drastic changes, but actually sort of trying to predict a team. I think you're struggling to actually have a full bench with what he's got. So anyway, let's go through all this team news. Harrison Reed is sick and may have to travel on his own and may have to sleep in a hotel room on his own, but that's looking doubtful. Christoph Zimmermann has lost nearly a stone in weight in illness in the last week, 6 kilograms as Daniel put it. He trained for the first time today. Maurice Leitner, of course, went off with an injury on Saturday at Hull. He's out for 4 weeks with a hamstring injury. Marcus Stiepermann had his hernia operation. He's not back till after the international break. Alex Tettey, he has got a sore knee. Nothing new there. That seems to have
just wear and tear, yeah.
Just wear and tear. Yeah. But also he's on 9 yellow cards. Tomorrow is Norwich's 37th game of the season, so he has to get through that game, and then it's the amnesty after that game. Probably the big one, really. Nelson Oliveira out for 2 weeks with a calf injury. Tom Tribal, we already knew, wouldn't be back till after the international break with his knee injury. Matt Jarvis and Lewin Thompson already out long term. Paddy Davitt, what do you make of all that?
Well, you were going to include me in the injury wrap there, mate.
No, I'm the sick note of sports.
Yeah, okay. No, it's. I mean, obviously, Tribal, Stiepermann, Matt Jarvis, and obviously Lewin Thompson. Yeah, we knew about those anyway. I think everybody who was there at Hull Saturday would have felt that Leitner was going to be out for the foreseeable, and so that's been confirmed today. But yeah, Oliveira is the one. It just doesn't seem to be happening for that guy this season, whether it's injuries or his own temperamental forward boils, shall we say. So he isn't going to be available for 2 weeks. But really, the key area is that central midfield area. If you've got no Tete, you've got obviously no Tribal anyway. You've got no Leitner now. Reed sounds like he's struggling as well. You really do begin to wonder what's he going to do in that area of the pitch, and particularly what limits his room for manoeuvre is if Zimmermann really isn't. I mean, the payoff was that they would try and train this afternoon and they'd see how he was, and he'll probably obviously travel as well as Raggett, but he's not really feeling that Raggett can do a job at this stage of the proceedings. So effectively you're probably locked into going again with the 4 at the back, and that's going to be Closer and Hanley, which then means it's not like you can go 3 and then wing backs and maybe compensate a little bit in the centre of the park. He's going to have to come up with a pairing, and picking through all of that, it's pretty clear that Vrancic will have to come in.
He's going to have to, yeah.
And it's who you play alongside him. If you're not going to risk Tete, if Reed isn't quite right, does Maddison play slightly deeper? And then it's who are the 3 in front of him. So on the basis that he's probably going to stick with the 4-2-3-1. Far from ideal, compounding obviously what happened at Hull. They were looking more or less, I would imagine, to keep it pretty much a case of you're the 11 who got, didn't do the business at Hull.
Embarrassed.
Yeah, well, yeah. You haven't by any stretch hit the strides that you know you're capable of. Go and put it right on Tuesday night, but that isn't going to be the case. And it's an interesting point you make. I mean, who does he go on? Who goes on the bench? Because
Raggett's going to have to, isn't
well, there is a 23s game tonight as well. So I mean, do you basically divert some of those lads, the more older of the development group who could possibly come with the first team? I mean, that'll be intriguing. I think the game is 7 o'clock tonight, so we'll probably get a team sheet around about 6. So imminently, and there might be a few clues in terms of who's gone with the 23s and Matty Gill to Southampton, but. Yeah, no, it just feels more of the same, really. It's just one thing after another, isn't it? This season, it's just a struggle.
Yeah.
If it's not goals for, it's goals against. If it's not goals full stop, it seems to be injuries. We had this at the start of the season, and then they seemed to get through it, albeit there was one or two longer term guys. And now we're clearly in a situation where, Daniel Farke, it's not so much who he'd like to put on the park, it's who's available to him to put on the park tomorrow night. And as I say, it's not ideal preparation by a long stretch.
I mean, looking at it, unless Reed and Zimmerman are fit enough to be on the bench, I think they're struggling for a full bench. So, if Tristan Abrahams or Adam Ida aren't, or maybe Anthony Spirou aren't in the squad for the 23s tonight, perhaps they have travelled. I mean, presumably a couple of the kids will have to have travelled with the squad to make sure they've got enough cover, but I don't know. A couple of comments coming through. Sam Cornell is feeling for the boys with a sickness bug. He's currently lying in bed suffering from the same. Daniel Farke jokingly said that he may have to kiss Christoph Zimmerman to have a bit of what he's been having, because he's lost a stone in weight in a week, so that's quite drastic. So you'd have thought that's going to affect his performance, even if he's sort of fit enough to actually be out there. You can't see him being anything more than the bench, really. No.
It's a strength thing, isn't it? And particularly the area of the pitch he plays in and what his game is. In fact, he was honest enough to say himself, after the grounded header at Wolves, that he's in the side not for his technical ability, but more for what he offers in terms of power and athleticism. And you would think, as you say, a week where you've lost a stone, and I'd imagine you've not really done much, as the guy just said there, probably getting out of bed too often. So
you're not going to be full of energy.
No, it's tough to think he would be able to come into the 11. I think at the outside bet he's going to be on the bench. But then if Raggett's travelling and you're going with a closer and Hanley, then keep him in reserve till Saturday in Reading, I suppose.
Well, with no Oliveira, and you're thinking that Watkins and Shrebeni are both going to start, you might as well have a young lad on the bench who can play up front. Shrebeni limps off after 20 minutes. You need a striker option, and Josh Murphy and Hernandez are probably going to have to start as well. So,
I think so,
you might as well have another option there.
Yeah, but on that point, Dave, I mean, we'll probably get into it now. I mean, we asked him directly about Marcus Edwards. You would think surely this is the game that Marcus Edwards would see some action, and the response was pretty much along the lines of no, he's not ready yet. He's still improving. He's still got work to do without the ball, and everything he said would lead you to think that no, Marcus Evans will not be in the 18 tomorrow night. So to me, that's pretty conclusive now. I'll be surprised now if we see that guy at all in a Norwich shirt, which
I mean,
it is what it is. But
last week Daniel did say perhaps after the international break, didn't he? So I mean, to have put a sort of timeline, it was a bit of a surprise. AD Dan asked about Marcus Edwards, and he is training, isn't he? Because I mean, we've seen James Maddison put some photos on Instagram, etc., of Edwards in with the group. So again, Daniel just repeated that line that they're not happy with him without the ball or against the ball. So defensively, I presume he means, and as in tracking back. So
I mean, he did add the caveat that and I could see where he's coming from on this one, that it would be a difficult scenario to throw him in tomorrow night, because coming out of Hull, everything is about the defensive behaviour, as Daniel keeps talking about. He wasn't happy with the first 30 minutes particularly, and the game as a whole, defensively, and he felt that that's probably not a good environment to throw Marcus Edwards into tomorrow night. A team who are coming off the back of a very poor performance without the ball, and he's looking for a direct response in that area of the pitch. And as we can pretty much guess from everything Daniel Farke says about Marcus Edwards, that isn't his game. So, but why wouldn't you? As you said earlier, if he's calling up development lads, then surely Marcus Edwards could be in that mix. But clearly not.
He was called the mini Messi by Pochettino, wasn't he? So there must be something about the lad, but whether we're going to see it or not, I'm not sure.
Just clarify for AD Dan there, what's wrong with Nelson?
Nelson, it's calf strain, isn't it? So a couple of weeks. So
which he's had, I think, at various times before, hasn't he? The issues with the calf, that sort of tends to be associated with explosive, trigger type strikers, I suppose, forward players.
Which means,
not good.
What games we've got? We've got Reading Saturday at home, Fulham home as well next Friday. So those are the two he could potentially miss as well. So I mean, to turn it around, as Daniel said as well today, that opens up opportunities. Jamal Lewis is tired. He could ideally do. We'll come on to Jamal as well in a minute. First international senior call up for Northern Ireland. We spoke to Daniel about that a bit as well, and ideally he could do with a rest, couldn't he? And James Husband is there. He is fit. He is ready to play. Do you think that looks quite likely tomorrow, Lewis, to get a little bit of a rest?
Yeah, you would say so. That's fantastic news for the lad today, but it is coming off the back of probably his poorest performance in a Norwich shirt at Hull. Daniel was openly admitting that today.
Almost made a bit of a joke of it, didn't he?
He did, but having said that, I attributed it potentially to a little bit of tiredness. He's played a lot of games. It's not just the physical element; it's the mental element. When you step up, as he has, many levels. He's completely bypassed development football and been pitched in, and he's not just coming off the bench in the odd cameo. He's actually playing regularly. So if there is a little bit of fatigue, it's entirely understandable.
Yeah, big time.
The only concern, of course, is on the other flank. You've got a guy coming back in Pinto who's only literally just, got his feet under the table and didn't cover himself in glory, it has to be said. Not alone in that aspect, but at Hull. So
he looked really rusty, didn't he? He got booked within 2 minutes because he clattered someone.
So if you have to go with a back four tomorrow night of Pinto, Closer, Hanley, Husband, I'm not sure that's going to instill too much confidence with any travelling Norwich supporters, but needs must, and as I say, it's a really difficult one to try and second guess him tomorrow because there's so many imponderables as we sit here.
Yeah, it's difficult. And he admitted that as well, didn't he? He said that he hasn't made any sort of firm selection decisions because he's going to have to see. Harrison Reed could wake up tomorrow and feel fine. So, James Maddison soldiered through a sore throat at the weekend, scored a hat trick. So we'll see. A few more comments. Barry Newman. After Saturday and our ongoing lack of goal scoring, I'm losing a bit of faith in Farke's ways of playing. Doesn't seem to be a happy camp. Too much squad rotation, as Marley Watkins said. Hasn't found a winning formula, albeit bad running injuries all season. Of course, that brought an end to a 7-game unbeaten run, 5 draws on the bounce at Hull on Saturday. But you don't like me talking this up, do you, Pad? But Barnsley have got a terrible home record. Only Sunderland and Bolton have got a worse home record. They've only picked up, I've got it here, I think it's 3 wins, 6 draws at home all season. Haven't won for 4 months. So that makes me nervous.
Haven't won for 4 months?
No, not at home, sorry.
At home.
And that was against Birmingham when Birmingham were awful. Long before Steve Cotterill was gone. So does that make you nervous as well?
Well, yeah, it only adds to the net. I think the nervousness is already there after watching what they turned in at Hull, but and then compounded with the injury situation, it does have a bit of a inevitable outcome to it, doesn't it? As we sit here today, but Daniel was quite keen to stress maybe some positives, that if Vrancic comes in, or as you said there, Husband, or Watkins gets another go, Shrabeni. Yeah, okay, it looks like it's a bit of a throw the pieces up and see what lands, but if one or two of them lads can really put down a marker tomorrow night, and let's be honest, you've outlined it there, Barnsley isn't by any stretch going to Wolves, going to Derby, going to Middlesbrough, and they've got results at all of those sort of grounds, so go and grasp it, go and force yourself firmly into the manager's plans when the injured lads start to come back between now and the end of the season. These are big as Barry said there, talking about Marley Watkins, he got a chance there on Saturday, and from having spoken to Marley on Friday prior to the game, said he hadn't had a lot of opportunity in his favoured right-hand side position. Well, he started on the right Saturday, and I didn't see a great deal that sort of screamed to Daniel Farke, play me, don't drop me. Now, you would think tomorrow night, going back to Barnsley, if there's one game he's going to be motivated for, it would be that one, just to show what a good player they remember him as.
That'd be very football, wouldn't it?
It would be.
Hasn't scored a league goal yet, has he?
No,
one in the cup.
No, scored one in pre-season as well. It was a bit tasty, but you have to have a lot of sympathy with Farke, at least I do, because he's continually gave these lads chances. And okay, I'd say what Marley might have said about the rotational thing is difficult when you feel you're in for one game, you're out for 4 or 5 games, back in again. It is difficult, but if that's how the manager wants to go, then it's really up to you to, when you get your chance, you take it. And Jamal Lewis has taken his chance. James Maddison had taken his chance. Grant Hanley's taken his chance. It really, the onus for me now, between now and the end of the season, is these players have to grasp the opportunity and don't expect it to be given to them. And if they do that, then off the back of that, you would think the results would follow.
Well, it would be nice for this season to just take a bit of a different route as well, and have a Marley Watkins winner or a Dennis Shrabeni winner, and give a sort of a fresh storyline almost, because it feels like it's been a season of going round in circles to a certain extent. Paul Jones, Edwards, what was the point? Is it not now time to give younger players a go? For players destined to leave now, with the current players failing to make the mark this season. Also a comment from Rory Power, with power and a fist emoji. I'm guessing that may be a family member of Simon Power in the Norwich under-23s, who of course was brought over from Ireland in January. So I'd imagine Simon will be in action with the 23s at Southampton tonight. But we will see when the team news drops. Stuart Dunn, similar. So what was the point of taking Edwards on loan? I mean, whether we'll see longer term that perhaps this was a little sweetener from Tottenham and they're just getting him up to shape with a loan for next season in mind, something like that, I don't know. But if he were to not play at all the second half of the season, then it would be very unusual, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it would be. But ultimately, I guess from Norwich's perspective, they're looking afar at a guy who's really highly rated, as you say there, Pochettino. Those comments are coming back to haunt him a little bit, but and a guy I think he was in one of the England youth squads that won a tournament in last summer. So pedigree-wise, from afar, you're thinking, well, there is a talented footballer. Let's get him in. He can improve us. Now, having got him in, I think he came with a slight back issue as well, so he wasn't fit in that respect. But having got him in and working with him on a daily basis, they're now maybe seeing that no, he's a little bit far away from what we require in a team in the Championship. It's a totally different scenario. But from development football, which is effectively all he played. I think he'd made 20-minute cameo in the League Cup tie at Gillingham, and he's had a few injuries since then as well. So, I guess it's you live and learn on that one. Daniel, I remember saying it was a no risk in the sense that financially it wasn't going to hurt them in any way, shape or form, and in terms of if it came off on a footballing sense, then obviously it's good for the lad, good for Norwich, because he would have been in and influencing games. And sadly, it looks like it's the other end of the scale. It hasn't come off on a footballing sense. So, as it stands here, you'll probably expect him to go back, not having featured too heavily, if at all, and he'll go back to Tottenham.
We'll see. I mean, football's a funny game, isn't it? Imagine after the international break, comes off the bench, scores or something, and everyone's going to be saying, well, why didn't he play?
Why didn't he play sooner, yeah.
We will see. He, like you say, he may never play.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, this is Daniel Farke's call. He sees him every training session. His view, same as with Raggett at the minute, same as with Tristan Abrahams. Yeah. His view is these guys aren't ready, so you have to back the head coach on that one.
You have to trust his judgment, really. It's the classic "what's going on in training," Neil, isn't it? So he's the guy that sees them every day. Yeah. You've got a trusted judgment, or you don't, and you feel he's the wrong man for the job. That's your opinion, isn't it? Barry Newman says we need to be careful not to get sucked into relegation. How many points needed to stay up? 46. I mean, they've already got 48, so I
can't see that.
It's almost impossible, I'd have said, for them to get relegated, which is kind of a nice position from the whole project point of view. Daniel should be able to be building towards that first game of next season from here, really, shouldn't he? But we'll see if he manages that or not. Simon Meadows feel Daniel Farke hasn't the easiest calls to make tomorrow night with the injuries, illness, and after a lot of Saturday's performances. Yeah. And Elliot George asks, do you think he'll go Shrabeni or Watkins up front? We were sort of talking about this a little bit on the way back from Colney, weren't we? And that he tends to be just one sole striker, really, doesn't he?
Yeah, I mean, I can just see basically 4-2-3-1, Shrabeni at the point, Watkins wide right again. I don't, because it flows into the only way he's going to go a 2 up top is if he went 3-5-2, and if Zimmerman isn't really fit and he doesn't really fancy Raggett in a 3, then he can't play the 3. So that you would think rule out him going with 2 out and out lads down the middle. But ultimately, if you're Watkins or Hernandez on the other side, it's for them to cut in and support Shrabeni. I think the interesting one, if it's got to be Maddison slightly deeper, is who plays the 10, because Maddison's not going to play it, Leitner's not available. Does Josh Murphy get a go? Because that's obviously the guy directly behind a Shrabeni, and that could almost become a 2 depending on how the game pans out. So, I mean, he's played Josh centrally more often than not of late, so that's an interesting element of this whole sort of mix in terms of which players go into the pot tomorrow.
Yeah, I mean, Shrabeni seems, it probably sounds a bit harsh, but from what we've seen of him, he seems quite one-dimensional. Sort of, he is a traditional centre forward. He's a big guy. You need to get crosses into him, try and get the ball on his head. But we'll see. The one I'm looking forward to seeing tomorrow more is is Hernandez, because he did play quite well again in parts on Saturday, but he did miss a bad, his touch really let him down for one that Daniel singled out.
Yeah.
Was as what did it describe it as 100% chance.
Yeah, but it was also the stage of the game. It was 3-3, and literally from the following move, I think, is when Hull got their fourth. So, on fine margins, Norwich go 4-3. That might have just deflated the whole players and fans and management. And it wasn't the first time, if you remember that. Can't remember the team, but his actual debut, where he came on right at the end, was it Millwall potentially? No, probably not.
Sheffield United, I think, maybe the defeat, wasn't it, when he came on?
No, I thought it was a win where basically Norwich was soaking up pressure, and then they just broke, and he literally ran from the halfway line at Carrow Road, drew the keeper, and just larruped it round past the post on the angle. And you just think that one, alongside the chance on Saturday, just a little bit lacking a composure for me. Which is, again, flows into he's not the finished article, clearly. Yeah. He's got to grow, not only in terms of adapting to the English game, but maybe just generally in his career, like Shrabeni, like a lot of these players, in fact, who are coming in from Germany. So
Borough, the win over Borough.
Borough, yeah, that was it, yeah. So, it's not a trait I would like to see moving forward, because there is a lot of potential there. You can see in his general play.
He's quite exciting as well, isn't he?
So. Yeah, so if he could just add that composure, and through that, then you would think he would get the odd goal or two. Then he looks like he could be a good player.
Will Carr says, "Hi guys, is there any sort of action that anyone can take against the referee for the seemingly deliberate ghost penalty on the weekend?" Certainly nothing we can do. I don't believe there's anything Norwich City can do. But
ultimately,
it's assessors, isn't it?
You got it in one. I mean, the assessor will have been there. If they're of the same opinion, / not happy with whatever his mitigation is, because I'm sure he'll have a different version of events, then he will be demoted. So it will be interesting to watch, actually, this round of fixtures this coming weekend, just exactly where this guy, Mr. Simpson, pitches up. If he's a League Two conference, then you can read between the lines he's had his knuckles wrapped.
Yes, he was not the best, I think it's fair to say. Ian Honeyman, Zimmerman was thrown in with little experience and stepped up to the mark. Maybe we could give Raggett a chance and play three at the back. I mean,
you're a big advocate of that, DF?
I think if Sean Raggett isn't ready to be playing in a game away at Barnsley mid-March, then I don't see why he'd be ready to play for Norwich City at the start of next season. Even if you do get a full pre-season, I think he needs to be involved. He certainly needs to start getting some minutes. Norwich, his career is going backwards at Norwich, frankly, isn't it? He was a man who was in demand.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, not broaden it out, not just tomorrow night, but between now and the end of the season, I think we're all in agreement. They're not really going to be worrying about relegation. So you couldn't get a more pressure-free, in terms of league position, set of games.
Yeah, exactly.
So if he really isn't going to be involved between now and the end of the season, then he's not going to be involved at the start of next season, when there is a lot of pressure, because they need to get off to a decent start. So, yeah, I would think if we don't see him in a Norwich shirt between now and the end of the campaign, then possibly a League One loan next season. As we discussed, they've got a nice tie-up with Shrewsbury. Potentially, if Shrewsbury got up as well, you could send him there and he'd get some Championship experience. But yeah, it's a strange one at the minute, because, as you say, Daniel didn't really want to go down the line when they're playing the four. They don't look as solid, but it does feel, just watching the last two games, that in the four, that Angus Gunn, he's having to do a lot more work, isn't he, ultimately? And so if you can play a three, then I would look to do that tomorrow night. And as you say, I mean, Raggett, you would think in a three he's slightly more protected, because he's got Hanley and closer either side of him.
Well, the one in the middle tends to just be the stopper almost, doesn't it? They're not the one who, that's normally Zimmerman, isn't it? The man who is just purely defending. He normally gives the ball to the other two to distribute. Yeah. So that's the way I'd be going. But we'll see. I was supposed to play devil's advocate on my own point. Daniel probably thinks, I don't want to make a load of changes, lose 3-0 at Barnsley. Then people are really going to be on at him and at the team. And that kind of eliminates the that breeding ground almost to develop for next season. Maybe he
Yeah.
just doesn't feel they're quite at that point
Yeah.
where they can start really making changes. But we'll see how he goes tomorrow night. I suppose that he is restricted. Elliot George, Farke argues that Edwards doesn't defend well enough. Surely worth having him on the bench to throw on if a goal is needed. I'd agree with that. Barry Newman, Dave, can you look at the stat of our 38 goals? How many scored out of open play and inside the 18-yard box? I will do that at some point. I won't be able to do that right now because that'll take a bit of fiddling about, but we will see. Just get your final comments in. We'll be wrapping up fairly soon. The other side, the other international call-up today is Grant Hanley, isn't it?
Yeah.
Back in the Scotland squad. He has been sort of in a few squads, but he's not been playing, has he? So you would expect that he is now going to be firmly in the mix. And there's two other Norwich players there as well, aren't there?
Yeah, Mr. Martin and Mr. McLean. But I mean, it's worth making the point. New management now as well. You know, Gordon Strachan, he was out of favour mainly, you would think, because he wasn't playing enough at Newcastle, and then when he came here in the first few months, Alec McLeish has gone in there now. This is his first squad, and that to me will be a very good sign, because Alec McLeish will obviously be picking players who he feels he's going to be wanting to work with into the next campaign. And I wouldn't say I have a forensic knowledge of Scottish football, but if there's better Scottish centre backs than Grant Hanley, I haven't seen them.
Well, I think Charlie Mulgrew's also in the squad, who's doing very well at Blackburn at the moment. So I think him and Hanley would probably, looking at the squad, I'm not an expert either on Scotland, but that they would look to be the best two centre backs. I'd certainly be playing Grant Hanley ahead of Russell Martin. I'm afraid. Sorry for the Russ Martin fans out there. Jez Arlo says surely Vrancic has to play now. Didn't deserve to be dropped for Leitner. Would you say that's a fair enough point? I mean, Leitner didn't really kick on massively, did he?
No. Yeah, I mean, the first two games you thought, well, what is this guy doing here? But I think as it's developed, whether it's the volume of games, you know, the incessant nature of it, whether that caught up in a little bit, but he clearly wasn't exerting the same influence as he did in those initial couple of games. Yeah, Vrancic is an interesting one. I think Daniel himself has said that he was a little bit hard done by because it did feel like, because we all know at the start of the season and for many games after, he wasn't really showing enough in terms of certainly his work without the ball. And I don't think really, I mean, you could see glimpses of his quality, but I wouldn't say he was massively influencing games, certainly not in the way Maddison has been. But I think there was a general feeling in the last sort of period that, you know, he'd got to grips with it a little bit more, and he was probably a little bit hard done by. But it's a fair point, you know, that there's no Leitner in his path tomorrow night. Get him in, and he is definitely one of those who I would feel needs to put down a marker now, because if he's going to be involved next season in terms of the 11, he really needs to be showing a little bit more than he has done to this point in his Norwich career.
Because he's not a kid either, is he? He's 28, 29.
He was playing in the Bundesliga last season. You know, pedigree, you can't argue with it. But again, you know, much like Zimmerman's gone through this process, but he seems to have come through the other side where they just needed to get to grips with what English football, and in particular the Championship, was all about. And I suppose more so for a creative midfielder as opposed to a stopper type centre back, that's quite a difficult process. But you know, he did, as I say, at risk of repeating myself, he did feel like he was getting to grips with it, and you know, I wouldn't be averse to seeing him on the team sheet tomorrow night.
Okay. Craig Brown, you've got a few comments here. You probably just need to head over to PinkUn.com and catch up with all the team news, or go back to the start of this video once it's posted. A few of your comments here. For instance, Shribeni is not good enough. Got to start with Oliveira. Oliveira's out for 2 weeks, so there's no competition there. But Craig would be happy to see Vrancic start tomorrow. Who was the chap that said? Johnny Woods said, "And along come Norwich." So I'm guessing that was me reading out how poor Barnsley are at home. They've just lost 2-1 at Cardiff and 3-1 at Borough. So you know, two good teams.
Yeah.
Cardiff clearly still pushing for an automatic promotion place, and we're going to get a look at this Ollie McBurney tomorrow night as well. 5 goals in 7. He's also in that Scotland squad for the first ever time.
Championship player of the month for February as well. So.
Absolutely. So Barnsley are sort of in transition really. Jose Moraes has replaced Paul Heckenbottom about a month ago, who of course went to Leeds. He was on Jose Mourinho's coaching staff at Inter Milan, Real Madrid, and Porto, was it the other one?
Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah. And he's a Portuguese chap, so he is still very much finding his place. He's 4 points from the possible first 15, so they're a team in transition. As far as Norwich's approach to the game goes, once we know who's actually playing, how do you think they need to be different from what they did at Hull? I mean, was it just a bad day? Can you just wipe it off as a bad day at the office? Because we haven't seen them show such little control of the game from the early stages in quite a long while. Do you think that they'll sort of revert to type, as it were, when they get to Barnsley and really try and control possession?
Well, I mean, ultimately, the best days on the road have been counter-attacking, soaking up pressure. The problem with that, and what we didn't see at Hull, was that they're usually very compact and they condense the pitch. But against Hull, and to be fair, against Forest down here as well, it was literally from minute one, it was like an 89th minute of a game where both sides are going hell for leather. It was so open, there was so much space on the pitch. Alex Tete was literally, I'm not surprised he looks like he's crocked himself, because the amount of acreage he was having to cover at Hull, because Leitner, Reed, those type of players, they're not able to do that defensively minded central midfield role. So he was almost he has to do the work of two people. So for me, it's really about getting back to basically being far more circumspect in the initial stages. It was almost like literally we have to win this game from the first minute. And the problem was, it was Hull who were landing the more telling blows, and it was only really by luck rather than judgment that they weren't adrift before Maddison moved centre stage. But ultimately, Hull did kick into gear. So for me, it's not about going back to basics. It's just about being a little bit cuter from the start and not trying to go trading blows with a Barnsley team who you think will be on the front foot, because they need the points, and they will look at a mid-table team, B, riven with injuries and illnesses, and think, this is our chance, boys. I'm sure that's the message that their manager will be getting across before those players go out tomorrow night. So, Norwich haven't shown in recent games that they're able to cope with these type of sides. So let's see if tomorrow's any different. But if they try and go toe to toe with the injuries they've got, then you just fear that they will fall the wrong side of it again. And if they do, then questions will continue to be asked.
Yeah, I'd certainly feel a lot more confident going into kick-off if it is three at the back, even if it is Raggett, just because that's where they've generally controlled games better. And Craig Brown makes the point. Jamal Lewis, Hanley and Closer have to keep the ball better. Hull had far too many chances after losing the ball, which is a totally fair point. They well, to be honest, Norwich were shocking that first 20 minutes before they started, or first 17 minutes before Maddison started getting them in front. And final comment goes to Ian Honeyman. We must finish above Ipswich. Still within touching distance, of course. Let me just quickly pull the table up, but just give a quick plug to our colleagues at the... go on that.
No, I mean, on that front, once we've finished, obviously not before, but just find yourselves on the East Anglian Daily Times Facebook page, and you'll see one of the more bizarre press conferences featuring Mr. McCarthy this afternoon, who is clearly not happy with the fresh waves of criticism that have come his way after a 0-0 draw at home to Sheffield United, I think. It's well worth a watch, because that is a man who it looks like is reaching the end of his tether with various media / fans. So, I'd take your point. Yeah, that is certainly one attainable goal between now and the end of the season.
Yeah.
But by no means do they look like they're moving in a forward direction. So, two holding patterns at the minute. But for me, at least, Norwich look like they've got a plan beyond this season. I'm not seeing that with Ipswich, unless there's something going on beyond the scenes that we don't know.
They're 4 points ahead of Norwich at the moment, and they're at home to Hull tomorrow. So we'll see where things settle tomorrow night. A former Ipswich player up front for Barnsley probably as well tomorrow, Kiefer Moore, who's a big lump, isn't he? He's 6'5", 6'6", something ridiculous, isn't he?
Even more reasons to get Raggett in.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. I mean, he is a League Two. I think it was Forest Green he made his name.
He was at Rotherham, wasn't he? Yeah, he was at Rotherham last season, wasn't he? Yeah.
So, I mean, you're right. I mean, if there's one thing Sean Raggett can do, it's win a ball in the air. So that could tie in. Who knows? Maybe Daniel Farke is thrown as a
curveball.
Yeah, exactly. So we shall see. Just it's worth saying as well, though. Barnsley were good at Carrow Road earlier in the season, weren't they? They drew 1-1, and they probably deserved to win that game. So if anybody travels to Oakwell tomorrow night and thinks, "Oh, well, Barnsley are terrible. They're 2 points off relegation, etc., can't win at home," that's the sort of attitude that gets you into trouble in the Championship, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. albeit that was Heckingbottom's regime, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Who always impressed me. You know, the times that Norwich played them this season, last season, they looked well drilled. All the players knew their jobs. They had a lot of pace, didn't they, as well? But that's the interesting dynamic, because I think that game you're referring to, they were playing on the counter basically, and it was Norwich who were dominating possession and territory. Tomorrow night, you would think the onus, with them being a home side and desperate for a win, would be on them to try and force the play. So if they do that, then I'll be far happier as we sit here now, with Norwich soaking up pressure and hitting on the counter, rather than if it's Norwich who are dominating the possession without really carrying a punch at the top end of the pitch. You just feel they'll get done on the counter. So yeah, there's a lot of interesting imponderables around this game tomorrow night, not purely down to which players take the field for Norwich, but just the approach and what type of game in store. But you know, it'd just be nice, really, wouldn't it? You know, because Daniel alluded to it after Saturday, that now the mood changes, because it's now, instead of being 5 draws on the bounce and really held their own at the likes of Wolves and Derby, came back in such thrilling fashion against Ipswich, and you feel you're on the cusp of something. Now it's a defeat and a poor performance, and it's no win in 6. You know, that's how the dynamic changes. Yeah. So if that's no win in 7 tomorrow, then, you know, Reading's going to be fairly uncomfortable watching, I think.
Absolutely. Right, well, me, Michael and Pad will all be on our way to South Yorkshire tomorrow. No toll bridge to cover, to get across this time, and no 5-car pile-up to get in the way. And we got to KCOM Stadium about 2:20 on Saturday, thanks to the problems on the road. So fingers crossed, nothing like that this time. But as usual, the three of us will be there to provide you the team news beforehand, all the big match build-up, and all the reaction afterwards at PinkUn.com. Plenty of video content for you to get your teeth into already as well at PinkUn.com. You've already filed the lengthy team news bulletin, haven't you? So we'll see what Daniel Farke goes with at Oakwell tomorrow. Cheers.